I never thought much about the overnight job at our self-storage facility, at least not until last Tuesday. I took the gig because I needed the money, and besides, the place was usually about as eventful as a public library after midnight. Just a few rows of corrugated metal doors, a humming bank of fluorescent lights, and the distant rattle of semis on the highway. But if you'd told me before my shift started that I'd be sitting here now, second-guessing the way the shadows slant against the cinder block walls, I'd have laughed it off. It started with something simple. I'd just settled in behind the little glass front counter with my coffee and Sudoku book when I heard muffled footsteps in the hallway, heavier than I was used to. We're supposed to close at 10 p.m. It's in big red letters on every sign, but sometimes people slip in at the last minute to grab something, so I wasn't too worried. Still, I glanced at the wall monitor, which cycles through the security cameras. There was a flicker on camera 3, but the screen rolled, and by the time it settled, the corridor was empty. I told myself it was just the monitor acting up again. The place always smells faintly of concrete dust and cold metal, but that night something lingered underneath, like old rainwater trapped somewhere it shouldn't be. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my puzzle. The pen felt slippery in my hand, as if I'd dipped it in oil. I wiped it on my jeans, convincing myself it was just a trick of the air conditioning. Around 11, I did my usual round with the flashlight, walking the length of hallway B. The storage doors all looked the same, pale blue, heavy, each one padlocked with the renter's own lock. As I passed Unit 117, I thought I heard a faint scraping from inside. I paused, holding my breath, but it stopped. Probably a mouse, I decided, or maybe the sound just echoed weirdly along the aluminum walls. My feet felt extra loud on the concrete as I hurried on. Back in the office, I tried to shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone. There's a big convex mirror mounted above the door to the hallway, meant to catch anyone coming in or out. As I glanced up, I could have sworn I saw movement behind me, a flicker like someone ducking out of sight. I spun around. Nothing. I forced a laugh, feeling silly, and checked the time. Still, hours to go. A little after midnight, the intercom buzzed. It's an old system, grainy and unreliable, but it shouldn't have been in use. No one was scheduled for late-night access. I pressed the button. Hello? This is staff. Can I help you? There was a burst of static, then a whisper I couldn't quite catch, something that sounded almost like my name twisted backwards. I let go, my skin prickling, and listened for footsteps, but the hallway was silent. I decided to check the main gate, thinking maybe someone was stuck outside, but my keycard wouldn't lock the side door. It worked every night before. I jiggled it again, harder, but the little red light just blinked at me, denied. Inside, the lights in the hallway flickered. The hum of electricity grew louder, almost a vibration in my teeth. I tried the emergency phone, just in case, but all I got was a wavering dial tone. My hands felt colder than they should have. I told myself it was just a power surge, nothing more. I kept turning over explanations in my head. Faulty wiring. Wind rattling the siding. Maybe a trick of the acoustics, or just the stress of being alone all night. But as I peered into the darkened corridors, I realized the air wasn't just cold. It pressed in, damp and heavy, like a wet blanket draped over my shoulders. The silence had a different texture now. Even the hum from the lights faded in and out, as though something was moving between me and the sound. I tried to shake it off. I paced the cramped office, checked the door again, looked at the monitors, each camera feed now running a second or two behind real time, lagging just enough that I kept catching glimpses of my own movements, echoed back at me. It made my skin itch. In camera 2, the hallway twisted slightly, like the lens was warped. I blinked, and the image snapped back to normal. Then the buzzer for the entry gate went off. Not the intercom. This was the harsh mechanical grind that only happens when a car pulls up. Except, according to the outside camera, the lot was empty. I went over to the glass, peering through at the sodium-lit pavement, but there was no one there. Still, the buzzer droned on, the kind of noise that claws at your nerves. I jabbed the override, and it finally cut out. I stood there, my breath fogging the window, and tried to convince myself it was just faulty wiring. Everything in this place was overdue for replacement. As I watched, a shape flickered at the edge of the lot, like a person, but wrong somehow, stretched too tall and thin. I blinked and it was gone. The lot was empty again, the only movement the stray plastic bag tumbling across the asphalt. I backed away, clutching my flashlight, and returned to the monitors. The feeds stuttered, jumping frames. In Corridor B, the one with Unit 117, someone, or something, was standing in the middle of the hallway. It looked like a person in a hooded jacket, but their face was blurred, featureless. It didn't move. I stared, willing myself to look away, but I couldn't. The static pulsed. The figure lifted an arm, as if waving, and then the camera cut to black. My pulse hammered in my ears. I dropped the flashlight and cursed under my breath. The sound of it weirdly flat in the small room. I scrambled to pick it up, hands unsteady. I knew I should call someone, but the idea of speaking out loud, of drawing attention to myself, felt suddenly dangerous. The air shifted again, colder. I realized I could hear something, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing, coming from the hallway just behind the office door. I pressed my ear against the door, holding my breath, listening for any sign of movement. The sound stopped. I waited, counting silently to 10, then 20. Nothing. No. My heart thudded so loud I was sure it would give me away. Inside the office, the overhead light gave a violent flicker, and then steadied, casting everything in a washed-out, sickly glow. I tried to focus on anything normal, the sound of the clock, the scratch of my pen, but every detail felt strange now. The Sudoku grid was filled with numbers I didn't remember writing, shapes that didn't quite add up. The ink was smudged, almost as if the page had gotten damp, but when I touched it, my fingers came away dry. I sat there, gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles ached, willing myself to get up and just walk out the front door. But the keycard still blinked red, and the big metal roll-up gates were locked tight for the night. Then from the hallway came a new sound, soft but unmistakable. The sound of a lock being undone, the heavy click of metal, and then the slow groan of a storage door rolling up. It echoed down the corridor, impossibly loud. In the hollow building, I jolted to my feet, heart hammering, every muscle tensed. I told myself I should call out, announce myself, threaten to call the police. Anything to keep this from turning into some messy confrontation with a desperate trespasser. But when I tried to speak, nothing came out. My throat was dry, tongue thick against my teeth. The monitor for camera 3 flickered to life again, stuttering with static. I forced myself to look. There, at the far end of Corridor B, the door to Unit 117 hung open. From inside, darkness spilled out. So black it looked wrong, like the lens had been painted over. I squinted, searching for movement, but the feed glitched every time my eyes adjusted, as if something was interfering with the signal. I could still hear that slow scraping sound, a heavy drag, metal grinding concrete. I told myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe they'd managed to pry the lock and were stealing something. I could describe the police report later, tell them how I'd followed protocol. That's what I clung to as I edged toward the hallway, flashlight gripped so tight my palm ached. The air out there was colder still, somehow damper in my lungs. Each breath felt like breathing through wet cloth. I shined the beam down Corridor B, the light stuttering on the metal doors. Long shadows bunched in the corners, too thick, twisting as I moved. The open door yawned ahead of me, Unit 117, its number hanging crooked, as if someone had tried to rip it off. I called out, voice small. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here. I'm calling the cops." But the sound was swallowed up, muffled by the weight of the place. I heard the faintest whisper in response. So quiet, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I stepped closer, the cement floor sticky under my shoes, grit grinding beneath each step. The inside of the unit was darker than the rest of the corridor. My flashlight beam didn't penetrate more than a foot or two inside. It was like the air itself was thick, swallowing the light. The smell hit me next, old wet earth, with something sweet and rotting underneath. I gagged and pulled my sleeve up over my nose. Then, just behind me, I heard footsteps. Quick, shuffling, too close. I spun, pointing the flashlight wildly. The beam jerked and jumped across closed doors, empty concrete, nothing else. My scalp prickled, and I realized I was sweating despite the chill. A sudden metallic clang sounded from deep inside 117. I forced myself forward, every instinct screaming to run the other way. The inside of the unit was empty. At least, it should have been. But the concrete floor was wet, slick with a dark sheen that glistened in the flashlight's weak glow. There was something on the back wall, a patch of shadow that didn't belong, its edges undulating like it was breathing. I stepped back, heart slamming so hard it hurt. And then the door, a heavy metal roll-up, slammed down behind me. The sound rang in my ears, final and awful. I lunged for it, fingers scrabbling at the cold metal, but the inside handle spun uselessly beneath my grip. The air was thicker now, hard to pull into my lungs, each breath whistling. My flashlight flickered and cut out. In the pitch black, I pressed myself against the door, trying to keep my panic silent, straining to hear anything over the pounding in my chest. Somewhere behind me, that whispering started again, soft at first, then louder, until it sounded like dozens of voices overlapping, all just out of reach of understanding. They hissed and mutted.